Hello, and welcome all to Movie Hunter, the show that tracks down the quality of all sorts of movies. My name is Hunter, and today in the 36th episode, our target is Home Alone, produced by 20th Century Fox and Hughes Entertainment, and distributed by 20th Century Fox. The idea for Home Alone came from when writer and producer John Hughes was getting ready to leave for vacation and was thinking of things he shouldn't forget, with him comedically thinking his kids, obviously, but then thought about the concept of a kid being left home alone more and more. From there, he thought that children would most naturally be afraid of robbers in that situation, and the story unfolded from there. The film was initially going to be distributed and financed by Warner Brothers for $10 million, but when Hughes became concerned that the budget might increase, he confronted 20th Century Fox in case Warner Brothers became unwilling to provide more money. Sure enough, when the budget increased, Warner Brothers stopped productions. However, it began again the next day when 20th Century Fox stepped in. Chris Columbus was available to direct, having recently left the film National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, who also did some writing, such as adding the character Old Man Marley. The filming took place from February 14th, 1990 to May 8th, 1990, over the course of 83 days. Home Alone released on November 16th, 1990, and made $476.7 million on a budget of $18 million. It was directed by Chris Columbus and written and produced by John Hughes. The cinematographer was Julio Macat, the editor was Raja Gosnell, and the music was by John Williams. The cast includes Macaulay Culkin, Joe Pesci, Daniel Stern, Robert Blossom, John Hurd, Catherine O'Hara, Devin Rattray, Gary Behrman, Kieran Culkin, John Candy, Ralph Foodie, and Michael Guido. The film was somewhat received with mixed reviews, though I think it's safe to say that it has become a popular film over time. In 2023, Home Alone was selected for the National Film Registry for preservation. The film was nominated for 16 awards, of which it won 10 of. The film also saw 5 sequels, though only the second one directly followed the events of the first film, with much of the same cast. The film follows the extended McAllister family preparing for their vacation to Paris, having gathered in Peter and Kate's house to all go to the airport the following day. The youngest son of Peter and Kate, Kevin, is being provoked by his family, primarily his older brother Buzz, into inadvertently ruining their pizza dinner. Having been sent to the 3rd floor, he is accidentally left behind when the family runs late, with the power and telephone lines being knocked out the previous night. Kevin is immediately excited by the idea of being home alone, though he does think that he made his family disappear because he had wished for it the previous night. Kevin eats junk food, watches violent movies, and just causes overall mayhem and destruction that you'd expect. When his family realizes that they'd left him behind, they call the police to send someone to check on him. Kevin is frightened when the officer knocks on the door and hides under the bed, only to realize that he's the man of the house now and can't be afraid. He goes outside to confront his fear, but the officer has left at this point, and Kevin is instead confronted by Old Man Marley, who his older brother Buzz told a bunch of scary stories about, and Kevin quickly runs inside. We are introduced to the local bandits named Harry and Marv, who want to rob the neighborhood, with the whole place being practically empty. But the real prize is the McAllister house, which they have reason to believe will be an enormous paycheck. They attempt to rob the place, but Kevin makes it seem like everyone is still home, and does it again when they try to scope the place out. While robbing another house, they hear a voicemail left by Kevin's father telling the neighbors the phone number of the place they're staying at in Paris. Harry and Marv go back to the house and discover that Kevin is alone and has been tricking them. They plan to come back at night, which Kevin overhears. Kevin goes to visit a Santa impersonator and request for his family back for Christmas the following day. He also goes to church, where he once again encounters Old Man Marley, who debunks the rumors about himself, and the two chat. Kevin tells him about his mistakes towards his family, and Marley tells him about his similar mistakes with his son. Meanwhile, Kevin's mom boards flight to flight trying to get back home, and eventually hitches a ride with a local polka band. Kevin returns home and sets a series of traps for the robbers, who trip them and chase him around the house, though eventually catching up to him when he goes to the neighbor's house. Marley then swoops in and whacks them both with a snow shovel and returns Kevin home, and the police arrest the robbers. The following day, Kevin's mom returns, and shortly after, the rest of his family. Kevin, happy his family returned, sees Marley reuniting with his son and granddaughter. To begin, let's start by talking about Kevin. Now, Kevin has always been a funny protagonist to me, and a difficult one to discuss and analyze, because on one hand, he has a really sweet story about appreciating your family and whatnot, but on the other hand, he can be very chaotic and insanely brilliant in his traps that he places for the robbers. I will say this, though, despite the contradiction that this would seem to place, it actually doesn't clash all that much. It all flows together quite nicely, actually. Maybe the one part that I think isn't great is the opening conflict between Kevin and his family. Like, this family, the kids especially, can be so ruthless to Kevin, and Kevin right back to them, to maybe a bit too much of an unreasonable level. Other than that, however, Kevin is actually a really fun protagonist. I like his initial excitement at being alone, and that slowly develops into maturity and regret at his actions. He goes from eating junk food, to watching movies and goofing around, to doing the laundry, overcoming his fear of the basement, and going shopping. The second half of the film especially shows this, with him requesting his family back for Christmas instead of presents. Similarly, his visit with Old Man Marley is really sweet, but more on that later. And of course, we have the final act that shows Harry and Marv trying to get Kevin, but falling for his traps, which we'll also get to later. Overall, Kevin is a good protagonist who's fun to follow and has a nice character progression as the film goes on. I think he acts very naturally and logically to how a kid would, minus the Phineas and Ferb contraptions, of course. I also appreciate the events that lead up to him being left behind, the little details that show exactly what happened. The neighbor kid who messes up the head count, who belongs to the same family that Harry and Marv later go to when the family is on vacation that the kid was talking about. The electricity being knocked out, and the repairman mentioning that the telephone wires won't be fixed for a while. Is it convoluted? Yeah, a bit, but personally I appreciate all these details that make the illogical seem logical, rather than just doing away with logical altogether. Next, let's talk about the robbers, the wet bandits, Harry and Marv. I think Harry and Marv are consistently the best parts of the film. There is a character I find to be better, but only in a couple of scenes. What I really like about Harry and Marv is that, despite being on the same side and having the same goals, they are very different and their personalities play off each other really well. Harry is much more cunning and clever, having disguised himself as a police officer in the beginning of the film to scope out the McAllister's house, as well as every other house on the street, and learning exactly what the security system is and how their automatic lights work and whatnot. Marv, on the other hand, well, I'm not actually completely sure what Marv does. Nonetheless, Marv is very comedic and serves well as Harry's helping hand and the person who he sends off to do the difficult work on occasion. I love the reoccurring joke of the movie Kevin watched being used to trick them, as well as the pizza delivery guy, which is another good example of Kevin facing his fears and utilizing them to his advantage, by the way. This, of course, leads to what many, including myself, consider the funniest and most anticipated part of the film, seeing the creative traps being used on Harry and Marv. I think it works well because, although Harry and Marv are charming characters, they are still the bad guys who want to rob Kevin. You don't feel all that bad for them enduring his traps because they are very much the instigators, and eventually turn to Harry and Marv seeking to get even with him instead of robbing his house. The traps themselves are all really great, and I especially love the ones that were set up previously in the film. Buzz's pet tarantula that Kevin accidentally frees is one example. Another that I just realized on this watch, and I'm not completely sure if it was intentional or not, but there's a passing reference to the fact that Marv is afraid of the dark, and later, when in the basement, he immediately tries to turn on the light, only for an iron to fall on his face. I especially loved the fact that they didn't hold back at all on the traps. Like, some of these definitely should have killed them, such as the previously mentioned iron to the face, or paint cans being chucked at them. I also love their final scene where the police arrest them and thank them for flooding each house they robbed, so that they know each and every house they robbed, which was something Marv wanted to do but Harry thought was a bad idea. Overall, these two deliver a very enjoyable portion of the film, as well as fun throughout. Without them, the film definitely wouldn't be nearly as enjoyable. Finally, let us discuss what I find to be the best, and also most overlooked, portion of the film, Old Man Marley. I really like the Old Man Marley subplot because, in the grand scheme of things, he offers very little to the main plot, with the obvious exception of saving Kevin at the end, and yet offers a very sentimental story that contributes really well to Kevin's plot. Him initially being the neighborhood myth is a very interesting setup, and for him to just randomly show up as Kevin ventures outside is very curious because it doesn't matter to the plot, yet they keep bringing it up. The movie clearly wants you to remember the character exists. We then get to the church scene where Kevin and Marley finally get the chance to talk and clear the air. There's something very charming and wholesome about Marley just being a guy, a human with a life and his own problems. It's very similar to the way that the villain in the Disney film The Fox and the Hound is redeemed. It just shows that he's a human. Kevin and Marley, Kevin and Marley's talk is also very profound in a lot of ways. There's something very interesting and important about the way Kevin responds to Marley's story and how he and his son parted ways. He gives he gives Marley advice that is very simple and telling of his innocence as a child, but in the same way is very profound and true despite its simplicity. He tells Marley to just call his son, just to know. Offer to reconcile with him, that way, even if it doesn't work out, he won't just sit there wondering forever if he could have made up with him. Marley, in turn, gives Kevin someone to grieve his distress to. Kevin confesses his love for his family despite his attitude towards them, and despite even thinking of them from time to time. I also really like what Marley says to Kevin about fear. He says, you can be old for a lot of things. You're never too old to be afraid. Old Man Marley is a really great character who, despite his limited screen time, has what is easily my favorite scene. I give Home Alone a 9 out of 10 for being a great Christmas film. Everything and everyone from Kevin to Harry and Marv to Old Man Marley are really great. A really fun film that I rewatch every year. Not the most complicated film in the world, but it thrives in utilizing its simplicity. Welp, that's all, folks. I hope you enjoyed and feel free to share any opinions you had on the movie. A new episode releases each week, so stay tuned to see which film I cover next. And in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.